Thank you. So from one idealist scientist to another, the next speaker spent his professional career in the aeronautical engineering industry. He's a member of the French Theosophical Society Adjar and currently the president of the Saint Jean branch in Paris. And what he mentioned that's really important, that he's the co-founder of a weblog dedicated to the search for the origin of the stanzas of Jacques. I think that's quite a task you've taken upon yourself there. And is currently developing a web-based project to build bridges between science and traditions. His name is Jacques Mahnich.
Good morning, dear friend, and hello to the world, by the way. First of all, I would like to thank dearly Jan, Herman, and Garrett for providing such a wonderful opportunity to share ideas on such a fascinating subject. Now, ladies and gentlemen, please fasten your seatbelt. We have still 30 minutes to try to reinvent science. We have heard in the first lecture about a definition of science, the how of life. It can be interpreted variously depending what facet of it is looked at. Emphasis was put on a dichotomy between universal occult science and the specialized natural science. The first one, universal science, is the fruit of revelation, which source is lost in time, brought to humanity by divinity or their servant, and which content are carried on by tradition from one period of time to the other one, from one continent to the other one. The second one, natural science, is the resultant of the development of human intellect skills based on observation, analysis, modeling, inference, and cross-checking. It is mainly based on logic, with mathematics as its supporting language. Nowadays, modern science has hundreds of academic disciplines dealing with all types of matters pertaining to the understanding of nature. So, science, whatever category we looked at, is the search for the understanding of nature or reality. This is exactly how HPB defines science. Science is an abstract of every fact, a comprehension of every truth within the scope of human research and intelligence. There was a time in our human history where there was no distinction between this category of science. Western science origin can be localized during the first period of the Greek philosophy, 6th century before Christ. At this time, the philosopher, the word scientist did not exist yet, were concerned with the discovery of the essential nature of the things. Their quest was named physis. It was not limited to visible things, and it was not separate from philosophy and from religion. Not only it was not separated, but it was completely embedded in a holistic approach based on knowledge which came from previous civilization, mainly Eastern culture, like Chinese, Indian, or Chaldean. Chaldean wisdom has been specifically identified by HPB as the oldest science of astrology and occultism. Therefore, the early Greek school of philosophy bear the mark of an all-encompassing, holistic vision of the world. The Milesians were named Ilozoists, or those who think that matter is a living body, making no distinction between matter and spirit. And it's interesting if we take just some quick quote about those philosophers. Thales de Milet, one of the founders, said that the world is one. Sounds familiar to us. and that the soul is eternally moving, and that the divine is the intellect of the world, also familiar. Heraclite said the world is ignited again according to some specific period of time, defined forever, and in conformity with karma. So you can see that in those two quotes, we have the three fundamental propositions of the doctrine, sacred doctrine. From this period of time on, many wisdom schools were spreading such a kind of knowledge. This unity, which contains and transcends all opposite force, named the Logos by Heraclite, start breaking with the elite school who identify a divine principle above the other gods and humans. From there, dualism was creeping, a new concept of indestructible matter surface. Atomism philosophy drew another frontier between spirit and matter, and it became the cornerstone of the Western thought for the next 2,000 years. The scientific knowledge was codified by Aristotle, who, together with the blessing of the Catholic Church authority, became the only reference for official science until the 15th century in the Western world. When Descartes wrote his Discours de la méthode in the 17th century, dualism between matter and spirit was in full swing, and all further scientists stayed in this line of thoughts. By separating spirit from matter, science lost its soul and could not anymore have a full understanding of reality. So, universal or occult science is not only the root of all science, but was science itself long ago. Some 1,500 years of dualism have covered it and blocked the capability for a full understanding of reality. Let's try to take a look at what could be the soul of science. Since Descartes, natural science has overcome the yoke of secular Judeo-Christian tradition which used to control fiercely any attempt to challenge its dogma. It took centuries and martyrdoms to emerge from obscurity. But then, when the door started to open, the pendulum went on full stop on the other side. Too happy to have killed the anthropomorphous god who had persecuted them for centuries, the 19th century scientists declared that science was or would be able to explain everything, including consciousness. It was the time of the positivists with Arthur Comte as their leading figure. It did not last long, but enough to crystallize the materialistic philosophy of life, at least in the scientific community. It was also the time when Madame Blavatsky published her opus magnum, The Secret Doctrine, announcing in her preface that the aim of this work may be thus stated: to show that nature is not a fortuitous concurrence of atoms, and to assign to man his rightful place in the scheme of the universe. Since this time, 125 years have elapsed, and science made tremendous progress, not only on discovery and theory, but also in its philosophy of science. The positivist attitude largely disappeared, even if it still resonates in some laboratory, and many of the science discoverers of the last 50 years have a much more humble attitude in front of reality. They publicly admit, not all of them, that they just do not know anything about the fundamental principle of the universe. That's a real change in this mindset. It's a completely new attitude, new opening, which may be an opportunity in time for the development of a universal science encompassing both approaches. What should or could be the underlying principle of the universal science of the future? To use the word of HPB, talking about the soul of that future science, a science which has the view of the cosmos as embodied consciousness, with everything in the cosmos alive, and governed by consciousness centers which embody themselves. We may want to start with the three fundamental proposition HPB made in the preface of her secret doctrine. But to be able to make this principle understandable, we will have to deal with smart ways and methods to communicate and convince the scientific community, not to fall back in the way too often situation where both parties just cannot understand each other and moved away from each other. The first fundamental proposition from the secret doctrine is the omnipresent, eternal, boundless, and immutable principle, symbolized by absolute abstract space and absolute abstract motion. During the manifestation phase of it, this is the global substratum in which we are evolving. Therefore, nothing exists outside of it, and the universe must be ruled by one uniform set of laws. The first fundamental proposition is a key concept which can be a basis for a new scientific approach, the top-down model. Everything in the universe, what we call matter, emotion, intellect, memory, will, intuition, etc., is the unfolding during the manifestation phase of this omnipresent, eternal, boundless, and immutable principle. Everything is alive in the cosmos. Inanimate matter does not exist. The unfolding process itself, the genesis of all things, should be identifiable in most of the scientific disciplines like geology, zoology, biology, and so on. The second fundamental proposition is the eternity of the universe, incessantly manifesting and disappearing like a regular tidal ebb of flux and reflux. Cycling processes have been identified by natural science almost everywhere, from the planet, star, and galaxy birth, life, and death, up to all existing forms on Earth, mineral, vegetal, animal, human. And new scientific theories are currently emerging. For example, the cosmology of the primordial universe from the famous Big Bang theory is evolving toward a pre-Big Bang theory, where the universe is collapsing before rebounding again toward a new expansion. Martin Bojewald, a renowned German physicist from the University of Pennsylvania, published such a theory called the bouncing universe in 2009. There are many other examples. Something is really happening in the world of scientific to find a new theory. Observation and model revealing the cyclic activity are existing. So what's need to be added to the why? It is the why. For what purpose are these cycles? Are they blind and random process like the Darwinian hypothesis tend to show? Evolution is a regular process which supports the unfolding of the eternal and boundless principle. Cosmogenesis and anthropogenesis, as described in the secret doctrine, give many tracks and trails which can be used as starting hypothesis to be compared with modern science in many of its branches. On both sides, that's important. One will need to be careful not to fall back in the trap of dogmatism if we want to succeed in this difficult exercise. The third fundamental proposition talks about the identity of all souls with the other souls and the obligatory pilgrimage for every soul through the cycle of incarnation in accordance with cyclic and karmic law. Here we have three concepts which may also be used as hypotheses for scientific research. The fundamental identity of all beings and the hierarchical structure of the cosmos, the cycle of reincarnation and the law of karma. And these are very well documented in the Theosophical and Indian tradition. The constitution of man, in parallel with the various plans of the universe, is offering many bridges toward natural science. Reincarnation of associate karma are no more religious beliefs, but subject for scientific studies, propelled by near-death experience. How can we imagine universal scientific approach tomorrow? We have identified the two different methodologies, the top-down and the bottom-up, deductive versus inductive. We have a strong intuition that these two must meet at one point in time, because reality is one. And we have already have example of supernormal phenomenon like telepathy, which have been demonstrated using current scientific methods as a causal process. You may remember Dean Radin experiment displayed last year in New York at the ITC gathering. This example illustrates one possible path to convergence between the two methodologies. First of all, identify phenomena which are outside the scope of the law of natural science, and there are many. And it's not to catch attention, like we've said at the beginning of the meeting. That was done for another purpose. Here, the purpose is to identify phenomena on which science cannot give answer, and we have some answers, so that could be a good starting point. Then record and demonstrate its genuine existence. 100 years ago, to demonstrate was to say, I've seen it. So now we have a way to record it. And it's interesting on the social network, there is a video from Rupert Sheldrake showing a very interesting experience about dog behavior. It just, a camera is on the dog at home, the master of the dog is moving away, the dog sleeps quietly, the one decides to come back to home some hour later, and without any possible explanation, the dog rise up, go to the door, and just sit and wait. You know that, I'm sure. And finally, the last point is use the occult science to substantiate the causality, the why of it, and communicate at large about it. Now the difficult part. It will require a great deal of intellectual investment and of knowledge acquisition, including extrasensory capability. And what role Theosophists can play in it? Let's listen to HPB on that. Know all you can, all that you can. Become conversant with and sift all that the schools have declared, and as much more on your own account as is possible. This is a must. If we want to be able to discuss, argue, and be convincing with any foreigner, we first need to learn his or her language. It is probably not necessary to master the most advanced techniques like quantum fields, superstring, and the M theory, but being able to understand the basic concepts and to follow new discoveries seems a minimum required. It may seem a big challenge, but a rewarding one. And it is possible. The creationist community in the US, now called intelligent design, have built universities and research centers with many PhDs to demonstrate that the Bible affirmation can be scientifically proved, like, for example, that the universe was created 6,000 years ago. And they came up with an hypothesis leading to this scenario. You just need to change the speed of light, and it works. Motivation, organization, and appropriate means can move mountains. So, how can we promote the theosophical view in science? The key difference between materialism and spiritualism revolves around matter versus consciousness. Theosophy can be like a GPS in a dark forest with no visible tracks, showing and demonstrating factually that consciousness is the root of all phenomena. Clearly, HPB has already stated that the beingness is symbolized under two aspects, one of the two being the absolute abstract motion representing unconditioned consciousness. Consciousness and matter are not opposed. They are complementary. We have also a quote in the Secret Doctrine saying that spirit or consciousness and matter are to be regarded not as independent reality, but as the two facets or aspects of the absolute. Also, another quote interesting from Taimni say that those two levels of reality are codependent. He said that matter floats and functions in a sea of mind, mind functions in a sea of consciousness, and consciousness functions in the void of plenum of the ultimate reality. In this triple world of matter, mind, and consciousness, all scattered are the monads who are rooted in the world of consciousness and are functioning in the world of matter through a complete set of vehicles on all the planes. This is why the natural science approach, as it was during past time and is still today, can observe, analyze, and model all facets of matter without getting any hints at the why of nature. HPB, repeating one of the master words, does not oppose matter versus consciousness, but describe matter, not physical matter, as the only component from which everything else, including spirit, emanates. I let you read this quote. One of the cornerstones of natural science is its ability to prove the validity of its discoveries and theories. The key word in this approach is consistency, coherence. Any theory or model has to go through the validation process. The peer review exercise is very efficient by allowing the whole community of researchers to cross-check and verify all aspects of a new discovery. This is a guarantee that at least the research methodology and the supporting demonstration are coherent. We have seen recently some discovery like the spotting of the gravitational waves or the measurement of a faster-than-light neutrinos being discarded after this review. But of course, such a validation process remains inside the mindset of natural science, which means only matter exists. Here, Theosophy can propose a better validation process for scientific discovery proofing. Above the current process, which has proved its efficiency, we may want to add some other criteria. Job already makes some statement on that, based on the wisdom tradition teachings. Following the adage of as above, so below, we could evaluate the universality of a law. Using the cosmogenesis and anthropogenesis model brought by the masters and HPB, we could also verify its consistency with the teaching and be ready to revisit some of them. We may want also to assess its ethics, probably not at the research level, which would be difficult, but more at the application level. Science without spiritual values is leading the world toward more suffering. I will rephrase, men using science without spiritual value are leading the world toward more suffering. The current state of the world shows how science is used for the sake of egoistic purpose, and even if most of scientists have first of all an unbiased scientific approach, their discoveries are not always used for the progress of humanity. There are groups of individuals driven purely by profit who, starting from scientific discovery, engage in all sorts of business and industrial activity, including military use, with no or very limited care about impacts on all the living community on Earth. But we should not confuse the issue. At the end of the food chain, it is often us, the consumer, who allow this process to be developed. Finally, we could assess its beauty, even if it may look subjective. The unfolding of consciousness in our world is like a lotus flower blooming. The scientific law should reflect such a quality. In fact, it is already a criteria many scientists are using when searching for a model representing some physical phenomenon. We have an example with Henri Poincaré, physicist and philosopher, who wrote in one of his essays, "The scientist does not study nature because it is useful to do so." Surprising. He studies it because he takes pleasure in it, and he takes pleasure in it because it is beautiful. If nature was not beautiful, it would not be worth knowing and life would not be worth living. I mean the intimate beauty which comes from the harmonious order of parts and which a pure intelligence can grasp. So, back to the main theme, integrating science with religion and philosophy. The key question is, can spirituality alone or natural science alone lead us to the complete understanding of reality? Past history proved the opposite. Ultimate reality is a holistic whole, which approach requires a holistic research method encompassing the integral constitution and capability of man. In the period of time where we are living, we can sense a movement of acceleration in the development of humanity. Technological revolution like worldwide real-time communication, global cooperation, multinational projects, etc., have opened up many doors and minds who were sealed for a long time by tradition and religions. But also, it generates a big agitation all over the world. Unrest seems to pop up everywhere on the planet. The previous society models are falling down, one after the other one, and together with them their values. It looks like a burner, sorry to remember my career, which suddenly was set to max power. The boiling plate is on, and we are sitting in the middle. This is an opportunity for the wisdom religion to emerge again and provide with knowledge and guidance for the future development of humanity. The Theosophical movement, being the embodiment of this wisdom, has the responsibility to deliver the knowledge which was imparted to him. It can function as a source of inspiration for the integration of science, religion, and philosophy. It can point the way towards an ethical science whose researches and discovery would give a better understanding of the evolution and would serve the unfolding of the divine in nature. This is what the founder had in mind. Madame Blavatsky wrote, "Theosophy has aimed at uniting all broad religious people for research into the actual basis of religion and scientific proofs of the existence and permanence of the higher self." As a summary, we've seen that universal or occult science was the root, the soul of all science long time ago, that it lost its soul with the development of the intellectual mind, that modern scientists have a more humble approach, an open attitude, even if materialism is still the main philosophy of science today. Theosophy can provide foundation for a new approach of science, starting with the fundamental proposition of the secret doctrine. Bridging theosophy and science will require a great deal of personal investment in knowledge acquisition. The Theosophical movement then can serve as a think tank for the convergence of science, religion, and philosophy by providing and explaining its core teaching outside its closed circles. New values can be proposed for science discovery proofing process, like universality, consistency with the teaching, ethics, and Blavatsky. And finally, talking about the third object of the Theosophical Society, Madame Blavatsky summarized what should be the overall goal of the Theosophical movement, saying that, in one word, our whole aim and desire are to help, in at least some degree, toward arriving at correct scientific views upon the nature of man. Thank you very much for your attention.
And thank you, Jacques, for sharing the beauty that's in science with us. He's already sitting down, so if there's any questions, anything that he needs to clarify, there's one here with Carlos. Could you stand up just a little bit more, Jacques?
Yes, thank you. Thank you, both of the speakers, for that great insight of what science truly is. And I would like to ask the both of you to comment on my personal conception that science springs out of the spiritual need to know the nature of things. So science comes also from the heart, from within, from that quest that has given to us that inquire of knowing the nature of things. Now, that's one comment that I would like you to comment on it.
Carlos.
Secondly,
No, Carlos, I'm going to keep this very short because the question is if there's something you need to have clarified. So if there's more you'd like to discuss, I really want to ask you to do that during lunch or afterwards.
that's the second part. That's the second question that I want you to clarify.
I'm keeping an eye on
Please do so. Second, that being said, are you in agreement that in every principle of science, karma, the law of karma is behind every principle of science, in any science, the law of cause and effect? It seems to me that that is so. I would like to hear your comments on that.
Well, obviously, since scientists are looking for correlations and relations, this is looking for laws of cause and effect. So yes, I would say that karma and cause and effect and scientific laws are identical. But if we leave out the consciousness aspect of it, then we miss an essential thing to explain certain phenomena, for instance, in quantum mechanics. To give an example, the uncertainty principle of Heisenberg, that you cannot determine at the same time the position and the speed of a subatomic particle at the same time, is, according to theosophical views, connected to the idea that we are talking about a living being we are studying. And if we study that living being by sending measuring signals, this being is influenced in its behavior, and that is why it becomes understandable that it is reacting in an unexpected way. Hence, the uncertainty principle. So, yes, karma, law of cause and effect, they are all in one line, but to leave out the consciousness part is something that misses in science, and we, from Theosophy, can provide.
Thanks. Jacques?
No,
that's okay.
A very quick one to add to that. Causality has always been part, it was a core principle in most of the science until quantum physics came in, which has removed the causality somewhere and make most of the scientific miserable because now they don't know how to react to that. But it's a fact. That's all.
Thank you, gentlemen. And thank you, Carlos. Now, for those of you who don't know the drill yet, look to the left. There's one more board that we need to fill, and we have until 12 o'clock to do so. Patricia. Where? That's got to be at its duty.
It's just a clarification.
Just a clarification.
Yes, compliments to both speakers. Jacques, I believe you spoke about a German scientist, astronomer in 2009, who wrote a book somewhat challenging the Big Bang theory and was developing a theory of the universe in cycles that was perhaps more spiritual than the rather crude and somewhat violent notion of the start of the universe, which is in the Big Bang. And could you explain this a little more to me? Not now, then perhaps later, but thank you.
It will be more than a challenge, probably. I can recommend to read the book, but it's not... Let's say that this guy, Martin Bojovald, redefined from the existing knowledge of a quantum field some mechanism where the universe is on a perpetual rebirth. But going further, I mean, it's probably not the place to do that, and I will be pleased to give you more insight, but because it's, as many of the modern scientist theory, very complex one.
Jacques, what's the name of the book?
The Bouncing Universe, Martin Bojovald.
Excellent. For those who are not aware of it, so everything is being taped here and recorded, so we have a fantastic audiovisual crew, so tomorrow you can already, again, look at these lectures, write down the names, and look it up. So, if you want coffee, it's up to your own group. We have our own responsibility to deal with our time, but please be back here at 12 with the outcome of your workshop group. Same place, same group. See you at 12.